Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this latest episode of Now That's Significant, a market research podcast. This is your host Michael Howard, the head of marketing at InfoTools. Today we're joined by Aparnaa Rajasekaran, the segment insight and strategy manager for Georgia Pacific's commercial business. In this role, she is at the forefront of uncovering and activating critical market insights to positively impact business outcomes. Aparnaa is a trusted strategic partner for senior leadership, category, sales, innovation, and marketing teams in identifying future growth opportunities. Her insights and perspectives power business strategy, innovation, and sales enablement, something many of our guests will be interested in hearing about today. She also is a mum of two wonderful kids, and during her leisure, loves to spend time outdoors with her family and read. Her all-time favorite book is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I hope I pronounced that one right. Welcome to the show, Aparnaa.
Thank you. This is a great introduction and happy to be here, Michael.
So can you give us a quick little an elevator pitch on The Alchemist?
Oh, that's a book that every time you read it, you find something that's exactly applicable to where you are in your life. I have read it 4 times. My first time I read it, I think I was 17. So it's amazing. On the biggest takeaway for me is your fulfillment is right at your feet. So you just have to open your eyes and see it.
Okay, I'll have to add it to my reading list then, and I'll let you know how it goes. So we like to start out many of our episodes by exploring a little background on our guests. So would you like to share a little bit about your career journey and how you landed at your current role with Georgia Pacific?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for asking. When I reflect on my career, when I look back, I see it is guided by 2 things. There's a huge aspect of serendipity, and on one end, and then there is also just the passion for excellence. I just love to do things, that are extremely interesting for me. And most importantly, what I want you to know is I'm extremely inquisitive and have a huge entrepreneurial spirit. Like I'd like to get things done, like figure things out. And when that kind of couples with my broad and deep professional background, I feel there is a niche, that I've created for myself over the years. My professional background is well-rounded in sales, brand marketing, and insights, and it is coupled with a formal education in technology. And just by following my passion and understanding, oh, I love doing this. Oh, let me go learn about that. I think I spent my 12-year career across both B2B, B2C, and sometime in the media companies. So it kind of helps me understand like what's going on, in different spaces and bring skills that are applicable to different areas. And my interest in consumer psychology, another book that I really, really love is Why We Buy. And that was kind of my starting point to having a passion towards consumer psychology, and that led me to market research after almost spending half a decade in brand marketing. Eventually, consumer research was great, but eventually I wanted more. I was looking for ways that my insights can be even more impactful. Like, what else can I do with my insights? Is it just about a shelf at Walmart, or is it about a small product that is being launched? I was craving for how can I make it more impactful and drive business outcomes. So this led to a search, a discovery, and in my current role, I think I kind of found the magic bullet of what I was looking for, where I use the power of my insights and background to shape a lot of business strategy, innovation planning, and sales enablement. So it was a revelation for myself on different ways one could use insights and how important it is and the power that you hold as an insight professional.
So you mentioned that you had a academic background, at least in technology. So how did you think that set you up for, I guess, your take on how you do market research now? So you obviously had a little bit more exposure to technology in your background. So has that influenced at all how you research now?
It has. It is always in the background, and we have seen how things have evolved from, like a paper research to online to a lot of AI. So the formal education in technology has always helped me be on top of things. I understand how and why pretty quickly. Like when social listening was emerging, I was able to harp on it pretty quickly. And now with AI, we explore a lot of ways on how to automate, some of the insights, work with our own vendors on like, hey, can I use AI, or can you all help me understand how to use AI? So I'm not spending like a 40-minute on downloading a report or trying to manipulate it. Can AI do it for me? So I ask those critical questions so that I can spend more time in understanding what the insights can do for my company, rather than understanding what data exist at this point. So it's been always like a guiding light, and just that bent to technology has always helped.
No, cool. So in today's fast-paced business environment, why are customer and consumer insights so critical for success?
I think today's demand for insights and analytics, first of all, data is abundant, in today's world. Everything is measurable. We measure how we talk, how many steps we take, what's our heart rate. So there's data everywhere. So that also fuels into company environments, right? There's high demand for insights and analytics, and more importantly, figuring out how does that drive a better business decision? And that's very critical at this point. How else would we understand who our consumers are, who our customers are, what are they needing, what problems are they facing, and how can we solve for them? So always, staying focused and listening to your market, whether it's a consumer or a customer or an end user, it's extremely important to have the right lens on the information and the data that we consume. Additionally, there are other, use cases that we're seeing a lot more, like, listening to your consumers. It fosters loyalty. There's a lot of implications on innovation. It enhances customer experience. Like, how do we know what's the customer journey? We need to go ask them. At the end of the day, it helps to mitigate risks and make sure we deliver on our goals. So it's extremely essential for running a successful business. And like I mentioned, the benefits are multifaceted.
Yeah, indeed. Today, we're here to discuss how insights professionals can influence business strategy. What is your take on this, and why is it important?
So this is, I would say, over my, career, I have started understanding that influence is a leadership skill. You can influence. If you're a leader, you have to influence. And with someone that comes from a research or an insights background, you just have a much more powerful tool with you to actually influence. And the way I would define insightful influence is it's the ability to drive positive change, or influence a strategic organizational decision or action based on deep, meaningful data information. So it's kind of a mindset. You're not talking about your data or information anymore. It's really about what is in it for me. How can the organization benefit out of the 10 things that I'm seeing? So these insights can come from many places. It could be primary research. It could be a syndicated report that you're, working with somebody else. It could be financial reports or pricing information, or you go on a sales call with, one of your sales guys and you hear 5 things. It can be pretty much anything, but the insight becomes influential when you are, as an insight professional, able to crystallize these into something more meaningful and actionable, so the leadership team can act on it. There's a bit of art and science to it. You have to know, and we'll get to some pieces of like how, this is how someone can do this. But you got to know the business. You got to know what problem you're solving for, so you can convert your information to meaningful insight. So that's what I call like the art and science of it.
Good, very wise. There's always a lot of discussion in the insights industry on how to get a seat at the table, so influencing, like you mentioned, to be able to elevate market research and insights within our organizations. So what strategies do you use to communicate complex insights to senior leadership in a way that can support executive decision making and drive those outcomes?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, data is completely democratized today. Everybody has access to similar or same, but how companies apply its data and insights really sets them apart, and how successful or not they are, or consumer relating to them. So as an insights professional, we have a unique way of enabling this. We can solve higher order things, enable business partners to look at opportunities they may not have, seen before, or inform them of headwinds. So this is really, for me, an opportunity to elevate an insights role or a professional to be more of a strategist. So that's the baseline I go into conversations with. But narrowing it down a little bit to your question on how does this change was when you're talking to somebody at who's doing a smaller business versus a senior leadership or an executive leadership level. I think the building blocks are the same to an extent, but you got to be really careful and understand this audience. The way they consume information or the way they process information at a senior leadership level is very different. They are generally scanning for, are there any threats or opportunities that I need to be aware of? Are there any prospective problems that needs to be solved? So it's important to go in with a point of view on how I can be part of the solution, rather than telling them, yes, there is a problem. Oftentimes, we are not only sources of information at a senior leadership level. There are many, many ways that they consume information and probably have a good idea of what's going on. So always being part of the solution and not the problem has helped me kind of think through, what is the value I'm adding to this conversation? Am I presenting it in a way that it's clear and concise? And to do that, it's always important to understand, where are they in the decision-making process? Sometimes you're informing them about something they have probably no clue what you're talking about. You're educating them in that sense. While in other situations, they're trying to make a decision. Hey, I'm going to, there is a mergers and acquisition I'm probably working on. There is, or a new business I'm trying to get into. So in those scenarios, their learning curve is way ahead. You're not at the base of educating them on what this is all about. So getting some ideas about what is this conversation or presentation going to drive, like what's the outcome, from this conversation, really helps to position, how you convey your insights. And again, I cannot emphasize more on the clear and concise way of presenting information. Like, what's the crux of it? Can you explain a 5 month, market report, that was done over 5 months with 5,000, end users in a 30-minute meeting? What is the top 3 things? So less is more, and we can always ask for more time if there is interest in certain areas. So I guess these are some of the building blocks or the most important things that I would say, or the strategies, as I talk to senior leaders on how to present information and be part of the, solution.
I guess the way that I think about it is like a Jackson Pollock artwork, where data and insights can be complex. Sometimes it's just like throwing paint at a canvas. And there's so much thrown at that some people just see a big giant mess. But some people who know what they're looking for can read that and be able to see stories in it, what the artwork's trying to express, etc. And our job as researchers is to take people on that journey, to understand what they're looking at and to simplify it down.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. Like, maybe aligning with them on exactly what they're looking for beforehand has always helped, or even talking to their teams, or, and understanding who's going to be in the meeting. Is it just your CEO, or is there a finance person in the mix, or is the manufacturing person. Sending a pre-read also always helps. Like, so you can bring everyone on the same page, and there's not a lot of time that you're wasting in setting up the context. They're ready to go dive into action. They already have read, the information, and we're talking about questions. So, those are some of the smaller pieces that really help to drive conversations.
That's right. So there's beyond senior management, it sounds like you share relevant insights across multiple departments at your company, which is amazing. Well done. Is the approach different depending on the department or function? But for example, do you share different data in different ways with, say, sales versus innovation?
I think with sales, it's always about how can I help close more? How can I use this information to make that sale or open up a conversation or even establish, myself as a thought leader? So again, the basic building blocks are the same. What is that outcome that they are looking for? And at different levels, it's different. So knowing what that is and having a clear idea, you can literally use the same set of insights or data to present it or process it and package it in different ways to be able to present or solve those problems.
And are some wanting, like your traditional PowerPoint, some happy with just a spreadsheet, some like a nice, always up-to-date dashboard?
Yeah, that's right. And a part of my role is also thinking about, especially when it comes to sales enablement, we do some podcasts, we do infographics because it's extremely snackable and digestible. I'm not sure there's one salesperson on this planet that would love to take a spreadsheet and go through that for like an hour to understand what's going on. Their job is not focused on that. Their job is to understand what is the final story and how can I help sell more of the company's product. So snackable pieces have always helped with sales. I think usually the business teams are very interested in knowing, what is their summary of recommendations. There could be 100-slide deck, but then what's that top 2 slides that talk about what can you go do about this data or information? And why do we think so? What is the rationale behind it? So different teams have different outcomes that they are trying to achieve, and having a good sense of what that really means. As an insights professional, you become part of their team. You start understanding them, at the back of your head. So you start making those concise information in a way that is meaningful for them.
Yeah, you're giving me some good ideas for my role, so thank you. Is influencing different when you share insights across multiple departments versus at the senior leadership level?
That's a great question. And I think the basic building blocks are the same, but there are some nuanced, differences because of the way information is consumed and processed at a senior leadership level. So knowing the audience is extremely critical. What are their outcomes? What exactly are they, looking for by using your insights? I'm going to talk a little bit about the senior leadership level and maybe then touch on the other departments. So at a senior leadership level, you often find that the leaders are scanning the radar for threats and opportunities. They are figuring out a big business decision. Are we expanding? Are we going into a new product line? Some big financial decisions. So having a perspective on how to solve their problem, if I were in their shoes, what would I do? Coming with that point of view really helps. And also knowing who's at the table. Is it just your business teams? Do you have finance in there? Do you have manufacturing in there? Because it's important. They may be at a different stage of understanding your insights or the market or what they're looking for. So having that perspective can be helpful. And a quick tip that I find extremely useful is maybe sending a pre-read or even asking their teams or them beforehand, like, hey, this is what I'm planning to present, and here's the outline. Do you see, is there anything that needs to be added in here? Or have you understood XYZ so we don't have to get into it? So preparation is essential, and making sure there's alignment on what's being presented always helps. We may not be able to get an answer all the time, but never back out from trying. So the overall point of view is how can you be part of the solution for the business challenge that they're facing than just giving them information. Do we understand where they are in the decision-making process? Is it more of an educative session for them to know about a market, or do they already know enough and making a yes or no decision on something, a new product launch or an expansion of market or whatnot? And at the end of the day, how can you clearly and concisely convey these insights? And when I say concise, it doesn't really mean a one-pager always. It could be a 10-pager, it could be a 50-pager, but then is it concise enough? Does it warrant that amount of information for making a decision? So having that point of view and asserting yourself and backing that really helps.
Very true. So when we think about that, then the insights industry often discusses how to get a seat at the table, to be that influencer, like you mentioned. What strategies are you using to communicate these, I guess, complex insights that we can come up with at times to senior leadership in a way that supports decision-making at the executive level?
Absolutely. I think we just addressed a few pieces of that, but it's more holistic. Getting a seat at the table is one part of the story, but once you get there, it's a whole different ballgame. So, like I mentioned, knowing who is at the table is extremely important, but it does not just stop with knowing the audience. So, over time, what I have just developed, a checklist or kind of things that I internalize. I call it the MKAS framework. It's just a basic, it's a thinking process. It's like, have I thought about all this? How does, if I were to go tell somebody how to achieve this, how can that come to life? So that's really it. It's not any complex industry jargon. So don't have to get agitated, I guess, by that. So MKAS, what does that stand for? Mindset, knowledge and authority, and then the last one is soft skills. Mindset is the big piece here, and as researchers, we are often trained to be researchers. Do we really permit ourselves to think like a strategist, or do we limit ourselves to be researchers? And neither is right or wrong, but if you are in a path to behave like a strategist or you want to make more impact, you have to work on the mindset. This is extremely fundamental. And allowing ourselves to be there and help leadership understand how the impact can be multifold is extremely crucial in this whole piece. Everything else actually comes after that. I think mindset is the most fundamental piece. And oftentimes it's a self-realization, or you may have a lot of mentors that kind of like takes you or makes you think about it. And I just have been fortunate to have a lot of mentors that have made me realize this is probably how I can solve for my restlessness to make my insights more meaningful. One of my amazing mentors, and she told me, hey, Aparnaa, you're not there just to serve data at the table. You are the table. You are the whole reference point. You are, making this conversation happen. So, it's extremely important. And another thing, it's a lot about self-confidence and validation too, right? You know more than this consumer or customer than anyone else in this room. You are basically bringing all of this. So having some, doing some work on the mindset really, really helps. The second piece is knowledge and authority. And, I think that's essential, very, very essential. Like if you have a mindset and you don't know what you're talking about, obviously it's not going to, make a cut. So I always keep my game really sharp on the research methodologies and, what's going on. Is this the most accurate way of solving or finding the information that's needed? More importantly, I spend all my time learning and staying connected to the business. What's the recent sales wins? How did we perform against our demand goals? What's our plan for the year? Who's our competition? What's going on in the competitive landscape? How is the team performing? What does profitability look like? So going beyond just solving one piece of the puzzle, the more time you spend and understand the business, you are able to obviously solve their problems much easier. So spending a lot of time there helps, tremendously. So when it's time to present insights or discuss a topic, you can package the information in the most meaningful way for the senior leadership or the business teams. And it's also important to offer respectful challenge and alternative solutions. Sometimes there's probably not a ton of budget to go, do a research. So do you have alternative solutions? Or sometimes they may not agree with your point of view. So, and if you still believe you have a point to make, how can you offer, respectful challenge? And when I say respectful challenge, it is essentially talking about the rationale behind why you believe what they're saying is probably not right, in the most concise way. So all of this helps someone to own the conversation versus just providing the information. So I think that's really the second big pillar in communicating complex insights. And the third one, and often overlooked or probably put at the bottom of the list, and I no means have it at the bottom of the list here for that reason, but I just love the way MKAs sounds. So let's call it that. The soft skills, these are central and it's very complex. How do you work on building trust? Do they see you as a strategic partner? How do you establish credibility? Are you nurturing the relationship with the people that you're talking to day in and day out? And are you communicating things along the way, or are you just going into meetings every 6 months and telling them what you know? So it's not a one-way street. It's a collaboration, and are you spending the time and energy to do all of these things, and also following through. And then, of course, there are other pieces here like storytelling. Is there value for storytelling? All presentations, insight sessions need not be storytelling, but then there is value when it has value. So knowing when to use which skill really helps. So I think that's kind of my 4 things to think about if you want to excel in, or even start understanding the building blocks of communicating complex insights to senior leadership.
Wise words. So is there any other advice on top of this or deeper from what you've just discussed about that you would give aspiring insight professionals or those new to the field on building a solid foundation, developing their skill to create positive business impact?
So I think the core of what I wanted to convey about insightful influence, we just discussed about it, but how do you get there? I'm sure there is a listener out there saying, hey, Aparna, I've heard all of these things in some shape, form, maybe in the last 2 years or in my career or whenever I read this book. How do I do this for myself? What should I do? Actionable 3 things, 4 things. I'm not invited to these big meetings. I'm not making strategic decisions. How should I work my way through it? So I think first and foremost, that's great. If you already know where you are, which I call self-awareness, that's the starting point. Honestly, assessing where you stand. And again, I go back to the MKA's framework. Take that framework, assess yourself on each of those pillars and see for yourself, are you a 2 on 10 or a 5 on 10 or a 10 on 10? And it can keep changing. You may be 10 on 10 in one versus a 1 on 10 in another. So having that, honest assessment, how do you rate yourself against each pillar? Do you think of yourself as a strategic counsel that can impact $1 billion decision, or do you feel, you are more of a technical craft master? It's okay to be both, but where do you want to go? Then, assessing yourself helps you put a map for yourself. Then that's self-assessment, right? Then the next part really is, do people feel the same way about me? Is this just in my head? So I would pick 4 or 5 people who we have worked with and you believe has some investment in your goals and growth. Ask them those questions. Tell them, this is where I want to go. I want to be a strategic counsel to my leadership team. I want to impact this business, in a much more meaningful way. And ask for an honest assessment. I always, preciously store my feedbacks and evaluations over time. It's a great tool to see how you have evolved on certain things over time or new areas that has popped up. And it's a never-ending thing. So again, external point of view, it's more like a SWOT analysis, right? Internal point of view, external point of view, and then thinking about, okay, now I know this is the report card for my skill sets that I need to get here. There are 2 ways that after this, there are 2 things is super important. Well, you can start building your roadmap, but then it's always easy to find someone who inspires you and you believe they're doing 1, 2, 3, 4, or just one or two, and then observe how they do it. Go talk to them, seek mentorship, start building out relationships to understand how you can get better at a specific skill. And last, which is something I cannot emphasize more, get out of your comfort zone. As someone that has worn multiple hats, I've been, in sales and brand marketing and insights. It didn't happen by plan. It's more through serendipity, but I feel that's an important piece of the puzzle. I kind of have a good point of view around various things. So that really helps to elevate one's point of view. So I think that's really some of the foundational pieces or developmental pieces to break down how to get there. And of course, there are a lot of resources externally, like books and podcasts, and I'm going to link a few of them that I absolutely love to the description here. But start there. So whatever your understanding of how you learn the best. Like, I'm a book person, so books are my first go-tos, but I love to listen to podcasts when I drive. So, or some people like mentors. So whatever that is, once you know where you lack and where you want to go, you know how to fill your gap.
True. Okay, so finally then, what would it be if there was one key takeaway or significant thing that you would want your listeners to take away from today's discussion, the power of insights for shaping business strategy?
That's a great question. And like I said, if there's one thing that I want to, leave this conversation with, remember, as a researcher, you have special power to see things that others may not. You can spot those bright spots, you can find those white space, use that superpower to impact big things. It's always more meaningful when you can change the world, change the company, change the business by your special powers than doing something more trivial. So aim for the stars. That's your North Star.
Really nice. I've really enjoyed our discussion today, Aparnaa.
Absolutely, it was a great opportunity to share some of the things that I've kind of learned just by various means and shapes, and share it with a larger group of audience through your podcast, Michael. This is interesting.
No, one of the lucky things that I have with hosting this podcast is I get to talk with so many different insights professionals, and these are people that have gone and put in the hard yards, sharing their insights and perspectives, and there's always something new and fresh. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, thank you.
And thank you to the listeners as well. If you have liked what you've heard, feel free to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or even share this with someone else as well. I'm sure they'd be more than happy to listen to some of the advice that Aparnaa has given. Until next time, thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.